Gaza under genocide again in the holy Ramadan, a call to end the complicity of the USA, NATO, and Europe. As the holy month of Ramadan unfolds, a time meant for reflection, peace, and compassion, the people of Gaza are once again enduring unimaginable suffering. The world watches in silence as Gaza is subjected to what can only be described as a genocide, a brutal campaign of violence that has left thousands dead, countless more injured, and an entire population traumatized. The complicity of the United States, NATO, and European powers in this ongoing atrocity is not just a failure of leadership, it is a moral crime. The silence of the so-called defenders of human rights. The United States, often self-proclaimed as the global champion of human rights, has consistently provided political, financial, and military support to the forces perpetuating their violence in Gaza. From vetoing UN resolutions aimed at holding perpetrators accountable to supplying the very weapons used to bomb civilian infrastructure, the US is not a bystander, it is an enabler of genocide. The hypocrisy is staggering. While Washington lectures the world on democracy and human rights, it turns a blind eye to the systematic destruction of Palestinian lives. NATO, an alliance that claims to stand for peace and security, has also failed to act. Instead of using its influence to demand an immediate ceasefire and accountability, NATO member states have largely remained silent or, worse, echoed the rhetoric of those justifying the violence. The alliance's inaction is a betrayal of the principles it claims to uphold. How can an organization that purports to protect human rights remain silent in the face of such blatant atrocities? Europe, too, bears responsibility. While some European leaders have issued tepid statements calling for peace, their actions, or lack thereof, speak louder than words. The European Union continues to maintain economic and political ties with the perpetrators, prioritizing geopolitical interests over human lives. The moral failure of Europe is particularly galling given its history and its claims to be a beacon of human rights and international law. The world is watching, and history will judge. The genocide in Gaza is not happening in a vacuum. It is the result of decades of occupation, oppression, and systemic violence against the Palestinian people. The international community, led by the US, NATO, and Europe, has repeatedly failed to hold the perpetrators accountable. Instead, they have provided the diplomatic cover and military support that allows the violence to continue. This Ramadan, as Muslims around the world fast and pray for peace, the people of Gaza are being slaughtered. Hospitals, schools, and homes are being reduced to rubble. Children are being orphaned, and families are being wiped out. The world cannot continue to look away. The US, NATO, and Europe must be held accountable for their role in this genocide. They must end their complicity, stop the flow of weapons, and demand an immediate ceasefire. A call to action. To the leaders of the United States, NATO, and Europe, your silence is deafening, and your inaction is complicity. The world is watching, and history will judge you for your failure to stand up for justice and humanity. It is not enough to issue empty statements or express concern. Concrete action is needed now. Immediate ceasefire. Demand an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. The bombing must stop, and humanitarian aid must be allowed to reach those in need. Accountability. Support international investigations into war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. Those responsible must be held accountable, regardless of their political or military power. End military aid. Stop all military aid and arms sales to the perpetrators of this violence. The US, NATO, and European countries must not be complicit in the destruction of Palestinian lives. Sanctions. Impose targeted sanctions on individuals and entities responsible for human rights violations in Gaza. Economic and political pressure must be used to force an end to the violence. Support Palestinian rights. Recognize the fundamental rights of the Palestinian people, including their right to self-determination and an end to the occupation. The genocide in Gaza is a stain on the conscience of humanity. The US, NATO, and Europe have the power to stop it, but they must choose to act. This Ramadan, let us not only pray for peace but also demand it. The world must rise up and say, enough is enough. Stop the genocide. Stop the war crimes. Free Palestine.